Thanks everyone for tuning in to the fourth installment of Let's Play Winnipeg, an Indie Developer Spotlight. My name is Daniel Voth, co-chair of IGDA Winnipeg, and I'll be your host tonight, along with fellow co-chair Corey King. So IGDA Winnipeg is a chapter of the International Game Developers Association, which is the world's largest non-profit membership organization serving all individuals who create games. So with the support of fellow co-chair Corey King, we at IGDA Winnipeg are working hard behind the scenes to provide a number of events and initiatives that will benefit our community. I encourage everyone to follow us on Facebook and Twitter to learn more about the work that we're doing, and follow us here on Twitch to get notifications when we go live in the future. So Let's Play Winnipeg is an indie developer spotlight where we invite local and external game developers on stream to play a selection of their independent and game jam projects. So during these Let's Play sessions, we'll have a chance to learn more about all of the creative and talented people in our local and the larger global community. We'll also have a chance to learn more about their process and insights into the development of their projects. And on today's episode, we have a Canadian game developer, co-creator of Celeste, and lots of other small games, Noel Berry. So I wanted to thank you for joining us on stream, and I was hoping you could share with people more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Noel. I co-created Celeste and a bunch of other small games from a long time ago. And yeah, I'm actually originally from Winnipeg, but I currently live in Vancouver. Yeah.
And what got you originally, into gaming, basically? Like, what was that like?
I started making games kind of like as a kid when I was, 11 and 12. I don't remember exactly the specific thing, but my dad downloaded Game Maker on our computer when we were kids, and I just started kind of messing around with it a lot. I think at the time he was kind of like, if you like playing games so much, because we like playing games a lot, obviously with our Super Nintendo and stuff, he's like, why don't you try making some too. So then me and my brothers kind of got into like messing around with Game Maker and RPG Maker, and kind of just went from there. And I just kind of I never really stopped after that. It just like an endless hobby turned career.
And then the other question that we can sort of kick off as we still deal with a few outstanding issues is, so like, why indie development? Like, I can't code, so I partly understand why I'm an indie developer, because I don't have like this high demand skill that a programmer would have. So was that a challenge? Did you always want to do indie games? What led you to specifically apply your game skills to making your own stuff?
It was kind of really like, it was very natural and organic, I'd say, because like when I'm a kid, you don't go work at a company because you're a kid. So I was making games when I was at 12 and 13, and I kind of just kept doing that. And then when I was a teenager, I started making Flash games, and hopefully we'll play some of them later, just to look at them. And I started making some money from my Flash games, and it very naturally just turned into a full-time job. So I never really thought, I thought about like trying to get jobs at studios, but since I was already doing stuff that was making some money and doing the things that I'd already been doing for years at that point, it was a very natural, organic, just like, I'm just making stuff, and I'll just keep making stuff. And then it slowly turned more professional, just kind of on its own.
Yeah. That's awesome. And obviously you co-created Celeste with Maddie, who you were actually roommates with. And so I know up to that point that you were roommates with them, and it could have spontaneously occurred out of that, but that doesn't even explain how you became roommates or any of the process of actually, making a game with a person, because that's sort of a big endeavor.
I met them through various game jams. So it might have actually even been a Peg jam. I can't remember, but this is like 10 years ago. So I met a bunch of different developers through various game jams, including Maddie. And at some point, a bunch of friends wanted to get a house together and just, get a house together with a bunch of game developers and just make games, adjacently at least.
I am ready to go. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
It's okay, keep going. You're talking about Indie House, right?
Yeah. So we moved in there, and that's where I met. Well, I'd known pretty much everyone for quite a while beforehand, but that's kind of where I got to know them really well. And then after that, me and Maddie lived in an apartment together while we worked on Celeste. And yeah, we just made Celeste together. I mean, with a bunch of other people, obviously too. But and yeah, that's kind of the story of that, I guess.
So as we're digging in, and you can kind of start whenever you want, Daniel. One of the things that hit me right away is the 3D art and 2D art. Mm-hmm. What was that decision about with the overworld? And
originally we were going to go with 2D art for the overworld as well, but we kind of played with a few different things, and we ultimately thought that the 3D overworld would add a lot of depth and scale to the world. So we wanted to feel like you're actually climbing a real mountain, and in 2D it just didn't feel like it was going to portray that very well. Like if we had a 2D map, it just felt like it wouldn't show the scale of it as well as if we just had like an actual 3D model. And originally our model was like a low poly pixel art model as well. But eventually we decided that it would make a lot more sense to just go all out with it. And yeah, that's kind of the direction. Originally our first inspiration was Yoshi's Island. The title screen, how it has like the little rotating island. That was our original like kind of inspiration for it.
It helps set, like, because the loading screen appears every time you jump into the game. It always helps set that context of what your objective is as well, which I really like.
Yeah. And it tied in with the UI art too, because I think by that point we decided that all the UI art was going to be high res, and so having the 3D mountain felt less weird with all the various UI art also being high res.
And this part here has the sort of like gibberish, semi Charlie Brown teacher kind of dialogue, right? But with the personality added to that dialogue when we're at the cabin here, or like all the dialogue in the game, it's VO'd in this way that still gives you like the emotional dynamics of the character, but I guess makes it easy to localize. But like, what was that decision?
Yeah, Kevin, the audio designer behind the game, really, drove that. I don't remember exactly the specifics on like why we decided. I think we wanted something, and we didn't want just like typing sounds. We wanted something to add like the characters. And so we tried a few different things and landed on this. Because we didn't want to do full voiceovers because it makes localization, as you said, a lot trickier. And yeah, we felt that this added depth to the characters, but also, wasn't them actually speaking the words. I feel like it was a kind of compromise between, adding depth to them but then not having to do full voiceover.
So as you know, being from Winnipeg, and as people watching from Winnipeg will know, this is like a big game jam town, and this game started as a game jam game. And there was a whole different version of the game focused on speed running, and there's obviously it still heavily has the speed running traits in it. But first of all, like, what was the subject of that? Oftentimes jams have like an overarching theme. Was that involved? Did that influence the game? But just that whole like that's an interesting journey, and I think it's a journey that a lot of our game jammers might really appreciate. So if you can just go into like, how did you go from that to this game?
In this case, it was less of a official game jam, and I think I had a free weekend and asked Maddie if they wanted to just make something for fun together over a weekend. So it wasn't like an official organized jam of any kind. Although I've been to many organized jams as well, but it's more just like, hey, we have a free weekend. Do you want to try making something in Pico 8? Because I found Pico 8 and thought it looked really cool, and just wanted to try making something in it. So yeah, we just kind of jammed out the original Celeste over a few days, and at the time it felt it was a very simple idea, just like a girl climbing a mountain, and just exploring that as much as you can with limitations of Pico 8. And then after we finished that and put it online, and a lot of people seemed to really like it, especially speedrunners, we thought it might be fun to try making a larger scale game. But at the time, like when we started the larger game, we thought it would probably be like a few months long project, like 2 or 3 months, and just make something kind of close to like what the first level of Celeste is like. So this chapter that we're playing through right now, we thought the original scope of the game might be just like a single kind of larger chapter. but then it kind of felt like it had a lot of space to go. So we just kept working on it.
There's some questions from our, like, basically the king of game jamming in City, Matt, but related to that, just before we get to one of his questions, Matt Will, is that decision, like you play a game jam, and I've seen some people make game jam games, and as a person who doesn't do game jams, and I couldn't even work in that restriction, I see what they make sometimes, and I go, why aren't you making this a full game? Why aren't you starting a studio? But I can understand it can be a scary proposition. Like, how did you, when you finished your 4-day jam, go? You know, was it just like you guys just felt it? It was, or like, you know, how did you come to that decision to say this 4 days is going to be something bigger?
It was a pretty slow burn on Celeste. I think we finished the jam game in August, and then I don't think we started the larger game until January of the following year, or like I guess so 4 or 5 months later. And like, I don't remember the specific reason. It might have been just Maddie just wanted to try making something new, and we had a good foundation with Celeste. Like, it felt like a cool foundation to work off of. The mechanic felt cool, and I think it was just like, well, this seems like a fun thing to like start building something off of. Let's just see where it takes us. But I do agree. Like, a lot of time when you're doing jam games, you know, they often don't go much past the initial concept, because sometimes the initial concept is really cool and can grow, and other times they are just like the concept is kind of expressed fully in the jam. Like, there isn't much more that you could push with the mechanics. But yeah, in the case of Celeste, it felt like there was a lot more stuff to explore. So it kind of grew very organically from there.
So one of the questions asked, is Dan Both playing? He is playing, and hopefully he pipes in a little bit. But the one question related to the game jam that
I did have questions of my own. I just like letting Corey finish his train of thought as I'm kind of getting into the game a little bit here.
So related to the jam, Matt wanted to know in the stream, how did the code for the platforming change over time? And I know that there is like a whole video breaking down like the arcs of the jumps and everything. I know it took you guys a long time to figure it out, but yeah, how did it change from the jam to the finished project? Just variable tweaks or pretty fundamental changes? That's the question.
It was a full rewrite, so it was a complete change from scratch. So we, like, the Pico 8 one is all written in Lua code, and then the final larger game is all written in C#. So we rewrote it from scratch, and I don't think almost any of the Pico 8 version carried over. I think it was pretty much a full, just like the Pico 8 was more of just like a inspiration board almost, I would say, of the larger game. So the larger game pretty much from the ground, like from the starting point, was a full rewrite with this inspiration. Like, this is the mechanic, this is how it should generally feel, and then just go from there. And then obviously as we made the larger game, there was tons and tons of iteration on how everything felt. Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm super familiar with in Winnipeg is like the game jam community. And before I got involved as much as I am now, like many people, I had watched Indie Game, the movie, and they had a bonus clip in there from, I think it was the first game jam that had happened in Winnipeg, I believe, and it was at like Fortune Cat. And I remember seeing a portion of that video where you were at that jam when you were still living here. So I'm kind of curious what the community was like back then and what your perception is now. Granted you don't live here, but yeah. So I'm wondering what the community is like back then when you were making games.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, like when I went to that first game jam, I didn't know anybody in the scene at all, because I think I was 16. So I didn't really know anybody, and I just went because I love making games and wanted to, you know, do a game jam. But yeah, I think at the time there was like a lot of creative people who were doing really cool stuff, and it was really inspiring and helped me, turn into the developer that I am for sure. And yeah, friends that I still have today. So like it was super inspiring. Basically being like a kid and being able to hang out with people who are actually making games was like super inspiring.
What role do you think, I don't know if this is kind of a cheesy question, but do you think like communities like that play a role in your personal development in pursuing in game dev, or is like game dev like a something that you can kind of pursue independently of like a community or external people?
I think you could do it completely solo on your own, but I think having a community of people that you can like bounce ideas off of and talk to and like show things and get feedback from is like extremely important. Whether that's in person or not can probably vary depending on the person. But I think that's like, for me, it was extremely important and still is. And I think it's really important, to have a community and just have people that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of, and just like, collaborate on things. I think it's really important, and it definitely shaped the developer that I am. Like it influenced me greatly. I probably would not be making games if it wasn't for things like game jams and like,
Daniel, you got your quote for your game jams. I would not be. There you go.
I'm going to be honest with you. As I was going through that segment of the game, I was like struggling a little bit. I didn't understand I'm still trying to get a hang of the dash feature in midair. That's what I like struggle with. Jumping on walls, it's got like the that Super Meat Boy mechanic and like many other indie games, but the dash is throwing me for a loop.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky to get the hang of it at first.
Hey, are you on the Xbox controller?
Yeah, I'm using the Xbox controller.
You hit the X, and then you use the gamepad directional. So it goes the direction that you follow.
Oh yeah, I know. It's just like trying to balance that mechanic with the wall jumping, when what I'm used to is just like the wall hang or the wall jump.
Well, and it comes to another thing that you guys sort of did, and I don't know if you know about this, Daniel. It might help if you do struggle too much with the game, but there is actually like an assist mode in the game. And then in juxtaposition, it's like for people. I didn't want to play because I thought I would be terrible in front of all these people, but so you saved me that. But the assist mode's there for a story. But then you have the reverse where you have like cassettes, and Matt mentioned leave those strawberries behind. There's the strawberries that you collect to change the ending. So there's this lot of like natural variety that you provided in terms of difficulty. Can you explain why you did that?
I guess we just want to make the game, well, I guess there's two things there. So the accessibility mode is we wanted to make it accessible and allow people to play it who want to play it. And then, in terms of just like harder challenges, that's a kind of a natural progression for the game, I think. We want to give people who are excited about exploring the mechanics and trying different challenges the opportunity to do so. Strawberries are a fun way to do that because they're just like, while you're playing through the levels, you have more things to try to do and experiment with. I think collectibles like that just work really well in this kind of action game where you're just trying to, solve puzzles, and there's like an extra puzzle to the puzzle if you so choose to do it. And then the B-sides and further like unlockable chapters that are just like harder levels. And those are more just like, instead of, challenges immediately there like the strawberries are, they're just like things you can do after you beat the normal chapter to try, harder versions and different puzzles and stuff like that. I think it's a fairly.
I'm realizing now that I can hang on the wall. Up to this point, like I thought I had to keep moving up, so I kept moving up into the spikes.
Oh yeah, you can hang on and jump and stuff. Yeah.
The thing that, because collectibles and stuff is very natural within like the NES inspired side scrollers that this is, but what is sort of seems really modern to me, despite like the graphics are obviously super harkened back, but what feels really modern is there is like no like interface, like there's no UI, there's not health, there's not, you just show the state, which Daniel, this will be helpful to you, but you get one dash jump, and when you've expended it and not recharged it, the hair color is different, it's blue. versus red, and that's about the only like mechanics indicator that's like consistent throughout the game. Yeah, like, you know, it seems so simple and obvious. Like when you see Celeste, it's like, oh, like that's beautiful and obvious, but like it's not so much when you're developing. There's always that desire to put stuff on the screen. What compelled you guys to go with this very like simple, you know, no interface kind of style?
Part of that was actually coming from the peak weight version, because the peak weight version has a really tiny screen. It's like 128 by 120 pixels. So we really didn't have a lot of room to work with there. And in that scenario, HUD kind of felt like it was obstructing the screen. So it didn't feel like we'd want to have things like obstructing the view in this tiny, tiny resolution. Especially when the levels ended up taking, you know, all corners of the screen a lot of the time. So there wasn't really a good place for it either. So that's why I felt like something like a visual indicator on the actual player made a lot of sense. And yeah, that's kind of where her hair came in. I'm pretty sure, I don't actually remember specifically anymore, but I'm pretty sure we had the hair like from the get-go. I don't think we're like, oh, we need an indicator for the player. Let's make her have hair that's long, and then you can see that from that. I'm pretty sure she always had hair, and at some point we tied it to the dash because it made the most sense.
It's where you're looking, right? Like it's
yeah.
right. So another question from Matt, and I do encourage other people to ask questions, but this is one that I think is an important one. Not that the other ones aren't, but you know what I mean. So like, what was it like ramping up the team to finish Celeste? Do you have to change how you organize yourself, the processes? You know, you're going from a small 2-person kind of passion project all the way up to, you know, a full-fledged team. So.
Yeah, I feel like that I felt like that was fairly organic as well. We worked like the artists we worked with, Pedro and Nomura, they both worked on Towerfall with Maddie beforehand. So they were a very natural like addition to the team. Like we've already worked with them for years. I worked with them on Skytorn for years before Celeste as well. So that felt very natural, just like people that we already had very good like working relationships with and were good friends with. So that felt very, very natural. And the same goes for Power Up Audio, because we'd worked with them, on Towerfall before. Maddie had with Towerfall beforehand, and I worked with them on Skytorn as well. I think the person we hadn't worked with much before was Lena, but she's just an awesome person, and really easy to work with, and has really strong ideas about how the music can fit in. So we just kind of like said, here's the gist of the game, here's how it kind of feels so far, and she just ran with that and did like a super good job. So overall, I think you're really lucky to work with people who are like self-driven, like have ideas about how their art should feel and be expressed in a space, and then 2, just also like really good people who are just very easy to kind of collaborate with and just talk to as friends and stuff like that.
So there's 2 questions here, but I'm going to like wrap them together because they're sort of the inverse of each other. Sorry if I butcher these online handles. Gomino asks, what feature are you most proud of developing? And Thrun asks, what's one feature, if you could, that you would change or alter?
Most proud of. I don't know if there's like a single one I'm most proud of. I'm trying to think. I think the things that I had the most fun with, probably, I had a lot of fun with in chapter 6. There's there's like this hair, this like large amount of hair, sort of, that's like flowing through the level, and I had a lot of fun programming that. Just because it's really dynamic. It like kind of like you chase it down these tunnels and stuff, and there's these huge like purple tentacle hair things you're kind of chasing, and those are just really fun to program and make look cool and stuff. I had a lot of fun with that. That's not really like in terms of the design or anything, but just in terms of like what I had fun implementing. And the other thing was like something that we could change. I think some of the bigger things we'd change is some stuff with how some of the progression can work sometimes, and how I kind of wish you could save and quit from a chapter at any screen and come back to it. Right now you can only, if you save and quit from a chapter, you have to return at a certain checkpoint. I kind of wish you could just jump in exactly where you were, but would require a lot of like UI redesign and rethought of how our structure works. So it didn't really pan out for this project, but yeah.
And Daddy Apollo wants to know, are there any important lessons you learned from developing this game?
Yeah, I feel like there's a million tiny lessons all over the place. Trying to think of like any good takeaways. Maybe we should come back to that and I can think on it a little bit because I can't. Nothing's like popping up immediately.
What it sparked in my head, not to say that this is the lesson, but I was just thinking something that when researching how you built the game and then looking at the credits of your game that I sort of am starting to check my own processes against is like your heavy QA testing. Like there is more QA testers, I'm pretty sure, than everyone else who made the game combined. And certainly I've seen some talks where you're talking about like, you don't really trust the analytics, just throwing in some analytics as much as you trust like looking at somebody and watching their face. What, you can talk about that, but also specifically like what do you feel the face gets you that like analytics can't?
I feel like, well, I think it kind of depends on the game a little bit. Since this is an action game, I feel like analytics in theory might give you less compared to something like maybe an RTS or something. But like for us, it was mostly just seeing where exactly things were going wrong and what exactly happened. I think if your analytics were like really good, like maybe you could see like an actual full playback of the player as they were doing things. You might be able to get a pretty good idea that way. But being able to see like what they're doing and then also see like talk to them and see how they're feeling about things is really hard to beat with just analytics, because analytics, the data points are like they're going to be a lot smaller. You're not going to get as clear an image as just like actually watching the person play with them talking to you. Like that's all the data. There's no more extra data points. You just get it all. So you get kind of a more rounded version of like what is actually happening. And a lot of the times people won't be able to express exactly what the problem is or what they're finding that's annoying. But through talking to them and seeing the things that they're getting hung up on, you can kind of learn like, okay, this thing is just in particular is not really working. And this thing is really working. But I think, yeah, just actually having people play the game and being able to watch them, it's definitely more time consuming, but I think the feedback ends up being better. You can learn a lot from that.
So one thing I'm noticing when I'm playing this game is like traditionally I'm not drawn to these styles of game, I suppose. But I will say it is satisfying when I'm constantly failing over and over, and then I find the solution, even though it took me a while to get to that point. It's the light at the end of the tunnel when you've died like 10 times in a row.
It might seem strange, but yeah, when I played it, almost when I get to the end, I feel like a Top Gun pilot somehow. Like even though it's not a flying game, you're just like, woo! Like you're like,
exactly.
I solved it, and sometimes you're relieved, like, okay, I'm glad I've solved this, but there's always that like nice release, which actually ties into a question from Strapaz Stefano here. I guess that's somebody that you may know. How much care and effort went into developing the intricate movement?
Yeah, quite a lot as well. And I mean that comes, Maddie was definitely the lead on that stuff, like all the player movement. But that also came a lot from testing, and like just watching what people were doing and how things felt. And we had mechanics that we took out and things that we tried. For a while, and early on in development, we had things like there's like a kind of an invisible climbing meter, and when you run out of stamina, Madeline gets tired and she falls off the wall. And for a while, we actually had us like when you landed on the ground, she had to catch her breath. So she'd kind of she'd run out of stamina and fall and land on the ground and like have to breathe for a bit. And we thought that was the potential that was interesting and cool. But it ended up making the pacing feel not good, and you just kind of wanted to try challenges and you get stuck on the ground and you catch your breath, and it didn't really feel like it fit the dynamic very well. So we just tried different things and explored different ideas, but a lot of trial and error, a lot of Maddie tweaking numbers over and over again, and then a lot of watching people fail at the game and see what's going wrong.
Matt this actually bounces right off this question. Matt wants to know, because it's all about like how getting these mechanics right, and how long after the game was mechanically complete before you shipped? Were you iterating on it until the end, or was it like, you have the mechanics and you're building it out, or what was the process?
We iterated on it right until the end. There's some things you need to be more careful of, like when you can't like start changing the jump height too much when you built 700 levels, because then all of a sudden your 700 levels don't work anymore. But there's like, so I'd say the further we went, the smaller the changes were. But we were constantly making changes, and Maddie was tweaking numbers, I think, down to the last like month or so. Yeah, it was kind of a constant. Just like tweaking things. I mean, even after release, and we saw what speedrunners were doing and how all that kind of stuff, we were tweaking mechanics slightly, making things easier, making things harder, stuff like that.
Speedrunners is actually an interesting thing, because from the get-go, like the first game was developed, if I understand correctly, for the speedrunning audience. Can you talk about that decision? And obviously it also worked out, like it was hugely successful. So talk about why you wanted to focus on speedrunners, and also like for anyone who wants to target speedrunners, like what are the key things that they need to know?
So with the Peak Weight game, we didn't originally realize that speedrunners were going to, play it as much as they did. But I mean, once it was done and speedrunners picked it up, we were like, oh, this is really cool. We really, we really like this. And when we started the full game, we really wanted to, include speedrunners in that. So it was kind of like a learning experience from the Peak Weight version that we carried on into the larger game. That like, oh, this at least this mechanic seems really fun for speedrunners, and they seem to enjoy this. So like, let's try to explore that and make sure that the larger game is really fun too. So there's a lot of things that we did that tried to make speedrunning entertaining. So there's like, for example, there's like no cap on Madeline's speed. She has no maximum speed. She's always approaching a maximum speed, so when she goes too fast, she's always like slowing down towards the maximum. But that just allows, pretty wild things to happen, and you can kind of chain together different moves and things that can let you go really fast, that speedrunners utilize a lot and break the game with a lot, but it adds to it. But yeah, I think just like kind of being wary about like what kind of things make speedrunning fun and what don't. So like this game doesn't actually have any RNG. There's no randomness at all. Everything is completely deterministic, which for some speed games can be really cool and some not. Sometimes randomness is fun, but just like weighing those kind of decisions, like when do you add randomness, when do you make things deterministic, stuff like that. And then also just getting speedrunners to actually test their game and see what they like about it and what they don't like about it. So we had the original speedrunners who speedran the Peak Weight version. Once this game was far enough along, we asked them to play it too and just see what their thoughts were on a larger game and like how we could make speedrunning better. So just more playtesting.
This kind of relates to a question I had, which is like a perspective that a lot of us developers don't have to face because we didn't have a game that was this successful. But like, what is it like to have everything you've done like broken down in videos to these very minute details, and like being asked all the time about these minute details? And also, did you learn anything about your game when you watch some of these things that like break down everything you did, or was it all like, yeah, that's what we did?
No, there's definitely stuff that you learned that you didn't realize you were going to be able to do. There's tons and tons of like weird bugs and edge cases. And I learned that there's a lot more like frame perfect game crashes than I thought there ever would be. But yeah, it's been a really interesting experience. I really enjoy seeing people break the game. I don't take offense, like if someone like finds a way to break my code and, totally do something ridiculous with it, I think that's kind of awesome. Generally speaking, our rules for fixing stuff are like, if it affects casual players, then we do fix it because, we don't want the game crashing or breaking for casual players. But if it's something that speedrunners enjoy and it's like, even though it breaks the game, we're still totally cool with it. Yeah, just like leave that because they're having fun with it. And it's not affecting casual players, so like there's no problem, even if it is not intended or it is totally wacky. Yeah.
CA Brandon has a question about project management. Did you guys have a particular project management strategy? I didn't see a name project manager in the credits, but like, how did you project manage it?
Our team was pretty, like our core team was pretty small. I think like day to day, there's probably 6 people working on it. So yeah, we didn't have like a project management like person in charge of that. I'd say that kind of just came down to, yeah, the 6 of us kind of regulating ourselves and each other, and giving direction. Maddie was, I would say, like the director. So they had a lot of kind of overall scope on like, you know, what's happening and where should we be going right now, which helped a lot. And I feel like if our team size grew, then maybe having a specific person to deal with project management might make sense. But for the scale that we were at, just having kind of someone who's kind of always thinking about the sort of larger scope, and then everyone else is kind of, you know, self-directing a bit with feedback worked pretty well for this game. But that said, like our team of 6, like everyone in there, I think is very like self-motivated. They know, they've all like made games on their own to various degrees, so they all have ideas about like what can I do to, you know, move the project forward on my own. So there was a lot of yeah, I think that helped a lot. But I think, yeah, I definitely think if the scope got larger, if we had more people all working on it, then yeah, having someone who actually like could keep all that in their brain and manage that might make a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, we did have stuff like Trello and various, you know, software to help mitigate tasks and stuff like that.
Daniel, let's check in with you.
Yeah, I think I'm stuck here a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit lost right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, this place is. Yeah, this is a tricky area.
Or maybe I just avoided the area that I was like, I can't do this.
I think you can do it.
If he switches to assist mode, does he continue on from where he left off?
Yeah, it does. Although you have to go back to the file select to be able to turn it on. So you have to like save and quit and go back. But
if it gets too much, Daniel, just remember that there's that feature, or do it immediately.
I'll just turn it on.
You can turn it on from the file select menu. So if you go back and select your save file again. You go up to
I have to go back again. Let's see.
Oh, if you go into climb there.
Oh, sorry, I see.
Yeah, no worries. And then I think that was your file.
Yeah.
So if you hit A on that one, and then assist mode, you can turn it on. Interesting.
There we go. So we have a question about basically someone with minimal programming knowledge who wants to do game development. Mm-hmm. Where should they start?
I think like a good call. Well, I guess it depends. Like if you're trying to start on your own, I think you will need to learn a bit of programming. If you're starting with a team, then yeah, I guess it depends on what kind of thing you're interested in working on. But I would just start with something like GameMaker or Unity. I started with GameMaker and I didn't have any coding knowledge at the time. I just kind of started experimenting with GameMaker and playing around with it, and that helped. That's how I learned to code to begin with and learned to make games. So I think something like GameMaker or something like Unity, and just kind of trying to make really small stuff. Just like pick something like I want to make a really simple game about this, and just trying to do it. And then when you hit like barriers, basically just try to split everything up into small pieces that you can achieve one at a time. Because it's a lot harder to ask for help if you have this like grand question of like, how do I make game X? And it's like, well, there's a million answers because it's too broad a question. But if you can split it up into like, how do I get input? Or how do I press a button? Or like, how do I move an object? Like those are much easier questions to answer. So if you can like start with sort of like, I always start with GameMaker or Unity, and then just kind of explore trying to make something, and just like, yeah, whenever you hit kind of some kind of barrier, try to split it up into small pieces that you can kind of step through. Yeah, that's basically what I did.
Can you talk like a little bit about some of the first games you've made and what that experience was like compared to where you are now?
Yeah, so I started making games, almost 15 years ago-ish now. And yeah, I started with GameMaker, and a lot of them were in some ways similar to Celeste in terms of like, a lot of them were platformers, a lot of them were pixel art games. And I kind of just like, played around with things that I thought were fun when I was like 15. But I think it's kind of interesting. I don't think the process for me has changed a ton. Like I'm obviously a lot more, I have a lot more background now. I know like a lot more. I know how to solve problems a lot faster. I've run into, whenever I've run into a problem, it doesn't usually take as long to solve anymore because I usually know my way around them pretty well. But the actual process of making them doesn't feel like it's changed that much. I'm still just kind of like, messing around with stuff and just making things with my friends. That's how it feels.
I was sort of wondering, like, even before this game, like a lot of your portfolio shows projects with like high caliber indie devs. I don't know if that's related to moving to Vancouver, which running IGDA Winnipeg, I hope that's not necessarily the case, but what is sort of how do you, other than having like the skills and talent that you obviously have, like what are some steps if people want to like mingle with crowds to sort of get that talent that really helps them go to the next level? What was your experience with that?
I think just making stuff. If you want to meet other people who are also making stuff, like I feel like at the time, like they just felt like people who are also making cool stuff. So I think if you want to collaborate with people, the easiest way is to also just be making stuff that is fun and interesting. And then, people will want to collaborate if you're also making fun stuff. So it's just kind of like nice.
I'm sorry. This was the place I was avoiding. I think this is where I needed to go, and
that was really nice. So I think just like just making stuff, and then it's a lot easier to collaborate with people if you have stuff to show, because if you haven't made anything, it's harder for people to, I guess, want to collaborate because they don't know like what you'll contribute to the project. But if you have just work on stuff and have fun making things, then yeah, it's easier to see how a collaboration will even work, I guess.
And what can like a community organization do? We sort of have this dream of saying like, by broadcasting our community loud enough, because we think we have a great community, like we can eventually attract devs here or devs like yourself back here. We've had lots of great devs leave Winnipeg over the years, create alchemy labs and things like that, as well as you. So it's like, not I'm saying that you have to come back, but I'm saying like what can be done from a community organization level, do you think, to create the environment that attracts sort of world-class devs?
Yeah, right. I don't know if I have a great answer for that necessarily. I think like the reason that I moved at the time was just because of friends. I just had I had friends in Vancouver who I wanted to hang out with, basically. So it was more just a matter of just like that's where the people that I knew were at for the most part. So I moved for that reason. But
we're relying on everybody in Winnipeg to make a lot of friends and force them to come here.
But yeah, no, I don't know if I have a super good answer to that. Because yeah, the reasons I moved were just felt kind of personal at the time, just where I was at and the people that I knew and stuff like that. But yeah, I think organizing things like game jams and stuff seems like a really strong, and just like building a strong community. I mean, which you are already doing clearly, seems like a really good direction.
Yeah, and I think the nice balance between having myself and Corey involved in kind of some of the community work that we're doing is Corey has like professional experience in the industry, whereas I have more of that community experience, and I know you had previously been involved in our local community in the past. You talked about it earlier. So the things that I'm interested in, or that I have a better understanding of is the like, what's it like making your first game? What are your opinion on game jams and things like that? But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of work that goes into it.
Yeah. I mean, having organizers like yourself actually organize things is really good because it's hard to maintain any kind of community if there aren't people like constantly, organizing things.
There's a lot of talk of the cold in the chat, which I just want to say this has been historic warm. January. You can't live here because of COVID, but it's warming up. That's probably bad overall, but it will deal with that issue. The other sort of question I had, it's somewhat related to like people analyzing your game, but there's plenty of stories of people who have a huge success that they didn't expect, which you would fall into that category.
Yeah.
And obviously it's very great. There's cool elements to that, obviously, but like it's something that most of us don't get an opportunity to have, and there's probably some other conflicting emotions going on than just the typical. It's great, and maybe there's not, but I'm just sort of trying to prime it in case there is. But like, what is that like, man? Like huge review scores, getting a Game of the Year award nomination. Like, these are not small milestones. And did it have, what kind of effect? How did that affect you personally? Both good and if there is bad, then bad.
Yeah, I think it's mostly good. Like, I think there's, emotional stuff that's probably bad, but it's like almost exclusively good. There's things that I did not expect. I wasn't expecting, I thought we'd release the game and kind of be done, like walk away, like, okay, sweet, we finished the game, it's done, and now we can make new stuff. And like, I don't think I worked on something new after Celeste for almost 2 years, just because like, it was constant, like, it required work doing all the post stuff because of the reception. So on one hand, I'm very glad that it did so well. It's awesome. It's very thankful that it could do that. But yeah, there was a surprising amount of like post-release endless work stuff that I was not expecting at all, including just like bug fixes, because we had so many people playing it. You find all sorts of crazy, weird bugs that never popped up during our playtesting. So things like that, and community management and all sorts of stuff.
Even that, moving off of it, like you see someone like, I hope this isn't too outside the purview of games, but like a George Lucas, who he continued to say for years, someday I'm going to go back and make my art films. And he just like obviously never did. He made it, helped Indiana Jones and stuff, but like, if there's some fear that this is going to attach to you in a way that doesn't let you move on, have you, or did it like make you eager for the next thing? And related to that, there's also sometimes people have a huge success and that like starts to become intimidating to do the next thing. Just talk about that in general.
Yeah. I think at the time, after Celeste came out, after the first few months, it felt a lot more intimidating to work on something new, because then it was really fresh. Now I feel like I don't care as much. Maybe by the time we're done our next game, I will care again. But currently right now, I'm just kind of like, I just want to make stuff again. I'm really excited about making stuff, and I feel like comparing it to Celeste there was that feeling for a while at the start for sure, like that, definitely. But now as time goes on, it just feels, it's further away, and I feel kind of like more free to be like, we're just making stuff and this is fun, and we're gonna make something good regardless of whether it's as good as Celeste or not. So I think as time goes on, that's less of a thing. But I forget what the kind of prelude to all that was, but I think
I'm trying to remember what I said. I think it was like like that level of success, does it make I think you answered all, like it make you eager to do more? Does it trap you a bit? And I think you answered all of those questions. Related to the development, Matt has another question in the stream, which is like, and I think you sort of touched on this slightly before, that there were some mechanics that you guys did throw out, but did you leave a bunch of mechanic ideas on the cutting room floor? Anything special that just didn't fit?
There's a lot of stuff that didn't make it in, and different things that we tried. I mean, the chapter 6 was originally like a water level. It was a big water level, and you swim around through it and stuff, and that got completely cut and changed. for a bunch of reasons, mostly because it turned out that water just kind of removed a lot of the actual interesting mechanics of Celeste. Like the interesting part is climbing and jumping and dashing, and the water just made it so that the dashing was the only interesting part really. So it took a lot of the things that made Celeste interesting away. And then, yeah, Maddie experimented a lot with different mechanics, especially in Chapter 5. There's a lot of, there's like these creatures that like chase you and stuff like that. And, you know, we played around with a lot of different stuff there. So there were, yeah, tons of various mechanics that were tried that didn't make it in, and things that changed too.
And is there something that like was that you still love that you know didn't make it in? Because that was like the second part of the question, which was like anything special that didn't fit. You know, water levels are always brutal, and a lot of people even in Mario are like these freaking water levels, right? So,
yeah.
But was there something that was like awesome, but just didn't?
I don't like. I feel like a lot of the stuff that was cut because it wasn't that awesome. So I feel like the things that stuck, like stayed in, are the things that we were already excited about, and the things that didn't stay in weren't that cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything specific that I can think of. Can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm sure there was stuff. Like, and I definitely know I made tons of stuff that just didn't make it in, but I don't usually feel bad about throwing out stuff. Like, I coded tons of stuff that was not ever, you know, actually utilized, but it was used in like, it was used as like a learning tool, right? So you throw stuff away, and I never really feel that bad about it because like it's always pushing you in the right direction. Like you're learning, it's like you're finding out what's actually good about the game and what's not. So it never feels like you're just like, you know, just throwing stuff actually away.
I remember you saying that in an interview, something along those lines. I think that's like a super important point, and I think it's important to keep, like, it helps keep your mind focused on the positive of those experiences, which kind of fits into there's a question from Thrun of did you ever feel overwhelmed at a certain point making Celeste, or we can just say mental health generally, because the game is actually about mental health. Like, did you struggle while making the game with mental health, becoming overwhelmed or stressed by, and if so, like, how did you do it? We may or may not all know how Celeste, not Celeste, but Madeline, the character in Celeste, gets through it, which is, you know, by stopping running away from their anxiety, which I thought was a very interesting angle. But for you personally,
yeah, I think it honestly, Celeste was in general a fairly smooth development. I think we messed up at the end. Like, we pushed ourselves to finish it and get it out the door faster than we should have at the very end. And I mean, it's good that we, you know, got it finished and put it out there, but I think we could have taken like an extra month just for our own like sanity, basically, because I mean, I did not sleep for like 3 or 4 days at the end, and it was not something I would call a healthy development at the end, because we were trying to push for like a very specific launch date, when I honestly don't feel like there was a reason to. So there's definitely a balance there of like, you know, you don't want to iterate on things forever and never release, but you also I wish that we hadn't pushed ourselves quite as much as we did, like right at the end, because in retrospect, I don't feel like, at the time it really felt like there was a reason to, but in retrospect, I feel like there wasn't a reason to. I feel like we could have just pushed it back a month and be fine. Because, yeah, specifically, like at the end of the game, we were detailing, a lot of the levels had their skeleton done, so all the design of them was done. Maddie had finished like blocking them out and making them feel good and all that, but the art pass had not happened at all yet. So we were like going through, I think there was like 750 screens, like at the end of the game, just like 750 screens, just like endlessly every, like, you know, 20 hours a day, just like detailing levels. It was not ideal and did not feel good, and I don't recommend that, and not a good, I wish we had just like being more chill about it and not push ourselves quite that hard, because there wasn't really any gain for doing that besides just like making us feel bad.
And this is sort of related as well, because Matt has a question about controlling scope creep, basically. Let's see here. I'm just trying to make sure I read the question right. How did you manage scope creep? Did you know how many chapters you would do early on, except, and yeah, how did you do that? And was there somebody who made that call? Like, it got shipped at this date, here's the scope, we're cutting this. No?
I don't think there was like neither Maddie or I made the direct call on that. That was kind of a conversation, and we just see what made sense at the time, and we get calls like, oh, we should release on this date, and for sure something to do that. That was kind of both of us deciding to do that. But in terms of actual scope, and scope creep, I don't originally the game was going to be a lot smaller, but I think it was around chapter 3 we'd been working on that we decided that it felt cool to kind of keep exploring it and pushing it further. And at that point, it was basically like, we're going to keep adding stuff to it until there's not that much stuff to explore anymore. Like the mechanic starts feeling like, the mechanic has shown what it can do and doesn't need to go further. And yeah, I mean, that was Maddie definitely directing that stuff because they were the ones designing the levels. So it was kind of just exploring like how do these mechanics work, how far do they go, and the story aspect of it came in later. So we had a lot of the gameplay-wise pretty done, and then the story would come in afterwards, and then from there we took the levels and back and forth. Like this section here didn't actually have any story at all. Like it was just, but it once there was kind of more this dynamic with these characters that we started liking and growing and stuff. We went back and started adding actual dialogue and things. So yeah, it was I don't have a good answer, I guess. It was kind of very organic and flowy. And I still don't know exactly when to say like, oh, this should be done or this is the scope. We never had a document of like, it's going to have 7 chapters and like, here's how each one works and stuff. Like there was never that. We just kind of kept working on it until it felt like we'd explored things that made it cool.
And how is that time funded? I think that's often where other teams are like, we gotta ship because there's no more money.
So Maddie had finished Towerfall beforehand, so they were surviving off of Towerfall still, which did fairly well. And then I was doing contract web design for the first half of Celeste, so I was doing web design for video games mostly, things like Devolver Digital games. I was like designing the websites. And then for the latter half of Celeste, Maddie paid for my rent and stuff like that so that I could keep working on it full time. And that's basically Maddie's previous game.
Yeah. He had the flex, which goes into the whole independence thing, which I actually wanted to ask about. Did you guys ever even consider talking to publishers? Or did publishers email you? Because I even saw that you guys actually did development well on Twitch, so it's not like this was done in secret. People would have been able to reach out. So all around that, if they did ask, why were you guys determined to go on your own? Having the money obviously helps, but I'm sure that there was some appeal, maybe or maybe not.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember if we had specific offers. I kind of feel a lot of the time with indie stuff, you have to if you want publishers, you have to kind of go out and find them yourself. Because I don't specifically remember any publishers coming to us and asking. There probably were, but I don't recall anymore. But at the time, since Maddie was in a position where they could fund the game from their previous game, there wasn't an immediate need to look for publishers. That said, if I was in a position where we didn't have that, then it would make a lot of sense to go talk to publishers and see if we could explore those options. But I think at the time there wasn't really a need to. And then we finished the game and didn't have one, and we were just like, well, we'll just release it. So yeah, it wasn't. I'm trying to think, but yeah, there wasn't a direct I can't remember any specific reason besides we were able to without it, so we just didn't.
And when it comes to actually developing streaming, to me that almost seems so counterintuitive, because when I'm creating, I hate anybody watching. I don't know if it's because I'm worried that they'll see the stain that I added in or something like that. But how was that process for you? Did that help grow the community? It was sort of I still think it's fairly novel. AAAs aren't sitting there being hey, well, here's the code, while they're making it.
I don't know if I actually streamed Celeste development at all. Maybe a little bit. Maddie might have done some level design on stream. That's probably, I think. I've done more streams actually now post Celeste on various side projects. But yeah, I think it depends on like what. Like yeah, there's definitely like you have to be okay with people like critiquing your code and seeing that you're actually not a good programmer and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just kind of I find it kind of fun now. I find it just kind of fun, just like a chill way to just kind of work on stuff slowly and answer questions and you know, let people see how I make games, which might help them too. I still don't do it like on our next game. We're not streaming development because we haven't announced it or shown it to the world at all yet. So now we're not quite as open with that stuff until, I mean, I hope we are later, but we're not right now. But I still stream development of like my side projects that I just work on in my spare time. Because I'm a lot more okay with people just seeing how all that's done and stuff.
Where do they find you? Where do people find you on Twitch if they want to watch you? Deb?
My handle is just Noel FB,
which is the same as his Twitter if anybody is on Twitter and wants to follow him.
I don't stream like super frequently, but here and there.
Yeah, if they subscribe, it'll tell them and they'll show up, right? Daniel, any questions?
No, not particular. To be honest with you, I didn't anticipate the level of tension it would require to kind of play the game and also ask a few of my own questions that I was wanting to ask. But generally, most of my interests lie around like your experience in the community at like previous jams, which you've kind of touched on already. So, yeah.
So this is, we've gone on about an hour, which is what I think we roughly...
Oh, right. I don't know if we wanted to jump into your other game before we close, just to give like the context of like where you are versus where you came from in terms of like an older game.
Yeah, it's up to you guys, really. I'm happy to look at that if you guys want.
The neat thing about this game, and the reason why I wanted to like bring it up before we kind of wrap up here, is Noel has an interesting connection to some of the old school, I don't know how to call it, institutions in Winnipeg with regards to game development. So I'm referring to the like Winnitron in particular. Actually, that's a good starting point. Can you talk about, I don't know if you had any involvement, but can you talk about your involvement in the Winnitron?
Yeah, I mean, the Winnitron at the time, it was kind of a bunch of Winnipeg friends, who wanted to, like game developers and stuff, who wanted to make a small arcade cabinet. And it was kind of just a passion project for fun. And yeah, I wasn't involved in the actual like construction of the thing, but I was around for most of it. I made this game at the Winnipeg Game Jam like almost exactly 10 years ago now.
That's so like a perfect tie-in that happens serendipitously there.
Yeah, so this is, I guess what I was doing 10 years ago. You can kind of see I was still making platformers and just messing around with stuff. And then at the time I was working with Flash a lot. So I was trying to, because I think I was 17 when I made this. So I was trying to, do Flash sponsorship, which at the time you could like make Flash games and then Flash game portals like Armor Games, Congregate, stuff like that. They would like pay you to have your game on their site. So that's where I was at the time. I was basically trying to make that my full-time job. So I was making weird little games and then trying to sell them to Flash portals. And this was I think the first game that I actually was able to sell.
I'm failing a lot.
Yeah, it's not easy. There's a lot I would change now if I was redoing this 10 years later.
That's actually one of the questions I generally have for people that do game jam games, that like fast forward, they gain a lot of experience and skills in different areas. If you were to go back and approach this game, what would you like do differently?
I don't know offhand exactly what I would do differently. I actually did recreate this game once in like probably 5 years later, or maybe 4 years later, like in 2014 or something, I think I recreated this game once. And I did a lot of things, like there's like, for example, the blocks just move, when you're moving them around, they just go through other blocks. So like I added like collisions so that you can't just like slide blocks through walls and stuff like that. And I explored way more with like, what does it mean to have like, you know, you can place blocks, like what does that mechanic actually mean? So I played with like lasers that you could block and like lava that you could block, things that actually made this mechanic interesting in the first place. Like you can place blocks, why not do stuff with them? This version of the game really didn't explore that at all. It's just like, oh, you could use them for platforms, and that's basically it. So I later on I explored a lot more like, you know, what does actually like this mechanic actually let you do? And you know, the bouncing lasers and stopping lava and putting them on switches to weigh things down, things like that.
Interesting bit of community lore I see in the chat. So your brother, who is a music composer and has which actually we've had him on the stream before, Liam Berry. He wrote this music when he was 15. That's what we're hearing in the chat.
Wait a second, did he actually write that?
That's what we're seeing in the chat, yeah.
Sorry, I love that, like, that's what I live for, is that, like, kind of community, connection, family, just kind of, like, everything coming full circle, despite the fact that you don't live here, you still have, like, family and stuff here, and then there's this old game that brings all those connections together in some sort of way.
Liam also wants to make everyone aware that there is a lot he would also change about the music. So I just want to make sure that got out there, which I thought was just a great response. And I do think that this progress is important. Like I know, like working in the community or even just having a studio in the city, tons of people, you know, they want obviously the goal to be an indie dev and to live and work in it, and to sort of see the difference. Not that there's anything here that's like ultimately, but it's not Celeste obviously, and to see that growth and that change over time, I think is like just a very valuable thing for people to see.
Yeah, it's definitely like in retrospect, it feels all really fast. At the time, it felt really slow. It felt like I was, you know, only getting better very slowly. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's everything's learning, so it's fun.
If we just, as we, another thing I think is a good juxtaposition of that, which we weren't able to play, but is even where you are now, not all games sort of make it to life. And you had a project that you canceled that came around the time, like that was sort of early on, around Skytorn, I believe is the name.
Yeah.
And it looked beautiful, and from the outside, it sort of seemed baffling that it would be canceled, but that's an important part of the process too, right? Like making those decisions is important and perhaps challenging, and if you just want to talk both about what that feels like to cancel a game, do you have any regrets about it? Why did you do it?
I mean, it's easier not to have regrets about it after I have another game that was finished that did really well. If Celeste did like super poorly, I'd probably feel more bummed about also having like a canceled game and a game that didn't do well. That would be a lot harder. So having a game that did well made that easier, for sure. But I think like there was just a lot of stuff about Skytorn that just didn't really work mechanically, and I didn't know how to solve it at the time. I have a lot better ideas about how I'd solve it now, but yeah, it just didn't. It was kind of a case of like working on making the game look and feel really good before the core was figured out. So that was a learning experience. That was just, I don't have any regrets about it really. I dropped out of college and worked on that game instead. So I feel like it in retrospect, it feels a lot like my equivalent to university. I learned a lot. And I would not have been able to make Celeste without the knowledge of that game. So it was a huge learning experience. And it kind of feels like what the equivalent of school would have been like.
Quentin Tarantino says the same thing, actually. Like he didn't go to college, and he left, he basically made films and worked in film store. He said that was his education. So I think there is something potentially there. Not that we're telling everyone to not go to college necessarily, but there is paths there, and it's sort of still all worked out. It was all a lesson. People are complimenting how good Skytorn looked. And they checked it out through the thing. It definitely looked really good. So I guess this will be maybe the last question. If we have access to it, maybe we'll open it up for a second and take a look at it. But there is a question of what's the favorite Flash game that you did work on?
Favorite Flash game that I did work on. Okay, I have a Flash game that I worked on. I actually don't know. I don't think it's playable, unfortunately. But it's probably the one that I had the most fun working on, and it was called Prison Panic, and it was a game that I made with a friend, and we collaborated on it together. And it was like this game where there's kind of two worlds overlapping, and there's like holes between them, so you can kind of see the other ones, and the holes would move around. So in one world there'd be like nice stuff, another world there'd be bad stuff, and you'd kind of have to like maneuver around and not get killed by the overlapping like worlds. And I had a lot of fun with that, just because I think it was a really good collaboration. Me and my friend Connor just really enjoyed working on it together, and learned a lot too. It was just a good experience to make. Unfortunately, I don't think it's playable because we made it for adult system, and I think their Flash portal is just like gone now. So I'd have to go find like a hard drive somewhere and get it back. But
that's sort of a unique challenge of making video games too, I find, is the deprecation and decay of the work. Like everything kind of decays. Not a lot of people are watching Charlie Chaplin these days, but like it's it seems like as we move forward, it's like books versus paintings. It's like it gets harder to preserve the actual art.
Yeah.
And now we're in this place where like unless a Mario game is remastered again and again, and those would be the ones that would be the easiest to access because it's like a locked console, locked cartridge. But there's still all that decay. Even CDs have like a decay time on them. How do you feel as like a creator, in this medium with that whole? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I think emulation is good. So I think that's a good thing, because I mean even for Flash stuff, like Flash is dying. You're not able to play Flash games at all. Probably, mid next year, I think, is basically when it's being completely deprecated. But there's Flash emulators now, so people are writing, Flash emulators that emulate Flash games and still run them, so you can still actually play the games, even in the browser, which is pretty cool. And I mean, those are still, in development and kind of only half working, but they're getting there, and they should be able to, sort of maintain a big archive of playable Flash games, which is really cool. So yeah, I definitely think it's too bad. It feels inevitable with just how computers are set up right now and continue to work. But I think things like emulation and like archival stuff like that is like really important and really cool, because there's tons of cool art and creative stuff that just doesn't run anymore. So having ways to still run them on modern stuff is a good answer.
Someone in the chat has said that Flash is officially dying in December 2020, which happens to be right now, essentially. So yeah, there's that. All right, so I think that was a super gracious for you to have come and let us know all about the making of this game, and to have that perspective. And I want to thank you personally, and I appreciate everyone coming out to the chat, and Daniel for not getting to maybe ask as much as he would have liked to because the game was hard.
You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I underestimated the my ability to play, and then also ask questions, and then also manage some of the technical hardware broadcast stuff behind the scenes.
That's very fair.
But I want to echo what Corey's saying. I thought it was really interesting to kind of have you on, and I wanted to thank you for your patience and flexibility through all this and getting this together, because I know everyone has busy schedules potentially and things going on. I just thought it was really nice and important to kind of build that Winnipeg connection, because I really do care about our community as well as along with Corey. So it's nice to kind of bring these things full circle, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Thanks for having me on. It was a really good time. And yeah, hopefully after people are allowed to travel again. I mean, I'm usually in Winnipeg like twice a year, so I'd love to come by some event if they line up again sometime.
We can make them line up. We can like force them to line up.
Sorry, go ahead, Corey.
I was going to say we can make them line up. We have the power to say there's going to be an event now.
Yeah.
Game Jam perhaps, because the fact that was your first Game Jam game, Celeste started as a Game Jam. Yeah. I happen to know that Daniel Voth here is a huge fan and proponent of Game Jam. There might be something there.
I think I'm a little bit like, sometimes I feel like I go overboard with how much energy I put towards some of this stuff. But I am percolating some plans for a big Game Jam, potentially this summer or end of the year 2021, when hopefully we will be able to congregate physically.
We could theme it as like Escape the Room, which is because there's a disease outside and the whole game is just trying to get the heck out of your house.
So like, if we don't do a physical Peg Jam in summer as a result of the kind of pandemic situation, we're for sure gonna do a physical jam in probably November 2021. But of course, if the pandemic for whatever reason is still not in a safe place, we're still gonna do it, but just in a remote fashion. We just hope the longer we push it, the easier it makes it. So maybe if you're around for that, we'll see.
Thanks everyone, and apologies again for what was probably the roughest start we've ever had, I think. But I'm glad people stuck it out and enjoyed the show. All right.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.